Welcome to Connect, the monthly series to connect you with your community. In each episode, we speak with experts, innovators, and community members and explore themes of loneliness, social connections, and healthy aging across Massachusetts. I'm your host, Sandra Harris, the State President of AARP Massachusetts and co-leader of the Massachusetts Coalition to Build Community and End Loneliness. We have a very special guest with us today, Kasley Killam, a renowned social scientist whose groundbreaking work has transformed how we understand social health. Kasley's new book, The Art and Science of Connections, delves into the profound impact that human connections has on our overall well-being. Kasley's book provides invaluable insights into how we can enhance our social health and, in turn, the length and quality of our lives. A member and one of the architects of our coalition and co-creator of this monthly series, we are thrilled to have Kasley back and here to discuss her insights. Kasley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It's
Good.
great to be here.
Kasley, can you start by sharing your experience in helping us to shape the loneliness and social isolation movement in Massachusetts, and why this movement is important today, and what inspired this program, Connect?
Sure. So you and I first connected back in 2020 during the pandemic. I was a graduate student at that time studying public health at Harvard and focusing specifically on solutions for loneliness through the lens of public health. And I think you read one of my articles and got in touch, and we started talking about the work that you were doing. And I was so excited to get involved and join the coalition. Back then it was called the task force. And yeah, we put together this Connect TV series back in, I think, a couple years ago. The idea was really, how do we reach people, individuals in their own homes, and how do we spread the word of the important work that so many researchers and policymakers and innovators across Massachusetts are doing with more people. And so it's wonderful and full circle to be back here now.
Right. And we really wanted to make sure that we were staying connected with those people who were not connected to social media or even network television. So we are now in our 28th episode. So I would say it's been a success. One of the profound teachings for me was the need to reframe how to best approach addressing loneliness. And your thought that we should focus on the assets more than the deficits. What did you mean by that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you know, I've been working on solutions for loneliness for many years now. And those are vitally important because so many people do feel chronically lonely, and we know the negative health effects that can have. In fact, there was a global survey done by Gallup just last year that found that 1 in 4 people worldwide feel lonely on a regular basis. So this is affecting a lot of people, and it's very important that we have tailored solutions for people who are acutely lonely. At the same time, I think that there's an opportunity now, given all the progress that we've made in recent years, to also zoom out a bit and shift upstream and focus not just on addressing loneliness when someone else already feels that way, but also thinking preventively and proactively. How do we even prevent someone from becoming lonely in the first place? How do we develop social health as an asset, as a resource, as a skill, just like we develop people's physical and mental health? And there are a couple reasons I think that framing can be helpful. One is that it's very inclusive, right? Not everyone feels lonely, but everyone can benefit from strengthening their social health in different ways. In the same way that not everyone is obese, but everyone can benefit from taking care of their physical health in other ways as well, right? There's more to social health than just not being lonely. It's also about having one person who you can really trust and confide in, or feeling connected to your local community, or feeling connected to your coworkers, right? It's very multidimensional. So it's valuable to focus on all those other aspects. The other reason I think it's important is that sometimes in the work that I do with organizations, we find that having a conversation about loneliness can actually feel off-putting to some people and maybe shut them down, or maybe they don't want to identify with that emotion. And so having a conversation about connection and community and social health as a strength and a resource can just help spin the conversation in a different, potentially more empowering way. And I've seen that that resonates with a lot of people.
When we met almost 5 years ago, I didn't know that there was a book on the horizon. What inspired this book, and what do you intend the reader to take from it?
Yeah, so this book is really meant to be a synthesis of the past over a decade that I've been focusing on this topic in various capacities. It's meant to be, first and foremost, a very useful toolkit for people to think about their own social health, to understand it, and to have actionable steps that they can take to improve their social health. So that's the first and foremost goal. At the same time, as you know, I come from a public health background, and so I'm also passionate about thinking about what do we need to do in the world around us, in our society, in our culture, to set up the conditions for people to be more socially healthy. So the book also explores how do we innovate in healthcare, in technology, in education, in different sectors of our society, so that moving forward, we will all live in a more meaningfully connected world.
Okay. You've done a fabulous job in all of your work to really expand our knowledge of social health. What is social health?
Great question. So if you think about your physical health as about your body and your mental health as about your mind, social health is really about your relationships. So it's the dimension of your overall health and well-being that comes from connection. And typically when we talk about health, we focus on the physical and mental. We think about, exercising or getting a good night's sleep or meditating, these kinds of behaviors that improve our physical and mental health. But at this point, we have so many decades and so much robust literature showing that connection is about so much more than just a positive mood. It determines how healthy you are while you're alive, but also how long you end up living. And so it's really important to elevate this third pillar of social health alongside physical and mental health, and to really think about it distinctly, because the actions that you might take to strengthen your social health can differ from the actions that you might take to strengthen your physical and mental health.
You also talk about how that missing pillar, social health, has been missing in the mainstream language as we talk about good health. Why is that the case?
Yeah, great question. So the idea of social health was first defined by scholars back in the 1970s, and yet today, as of 2024, there's still not even a Wikipedia page dedicated to social health. Of their almost 7 million articles, there's not one focused on social health. And the reason for that is that as time goes by, as our understanding of the research and of advocacy and policy and so on evolve, what we think of as what it means to be healthy, what we do to be healthy, our understanding of health changes over time. This is an ongoing evolution. It wasn't that long ago that we didn't realize smoking can cause lung cancer, and that we then had to understand that in the research, change policy, and educate the public to understand that, right? So that's an example of how our understanding changes. Similarly, it's relatively recently that mental health has been risen in prominence in our society and really is a part of the mainstream conversation. Now, especially among younger generations, Gen Z, my nieces and nephews, they talk about mental health as if it's no big deal. It's just part of everyday life. And as we look ahead in that evolution, the next step is going to be looking at social health and really elevating that to the same level of prominence, because at this point, we have the research to back it up. Increasingly, we have important initiatives such as the World Health Organization, focusing on loneliness as a public health issue, other countries around the world creating innovations around this. So there's momentum and there's a dire need, right? Right now, there are so many signs of social health really struggling. For example, loneliness is one indication, but also a lot of people feel disconnected from their community. In fact, in the US, it's 3 in 4 people who don't feel like they belong in their local neighborhood. Over 60% of people don't feel like they belong at work. Friendships have gone down in recent years. People have fewer friends and actually spend less time with their friends. So you can see in all these different ways that there's a true urgency now to really emphasize and prioritize social health going forward.
Okay, good. So what are some of the common barriers that people face when they try to improve their social health? And how do they overcome these challenges?
So one of the barriers that I see time and time again in my research and in my work with different organizations and communities is that people feel busy, right? And we can all relate to this. We're busy, we're caught up in our work and our deadlines and all the responsibilities that we have to get done. And, reading emails and so on and so forth, it's very easy to get caught up and suddenly to realize that months have gone by since you've spoken to a friend. Or you only see your family over the holidays, once or twice a year. And so I think there's a sense that the pace of modern life and the busyness that many of us feel is actually a barrier, right? Oftentimes connection is the last thing on our to-do list. It's the thing that's so easy to let slip and fall to the wayside. So that's one of the challenges. Another that I see time and time again is really people's mindset and sometimes limiting beliefs, and we all experience these. So for example, feeling anxious about introducing yourself to someone new or inviting someone to go for lunch or coffee, or feeling self-conscious and worried that maybe you're not lovable or not likable or things like this. So there are a lot of kind of stories that we tell ourselves in our heads that can end up inhibiting us from really connecting in more meaningful ways.
So what is the right amount of types and connections one needs to feel healthier and to benefit from the social health?
Yes.
What's the right number? And how can we work as individuals to make sure that we're not as busy and making this a priority in our lives?
Yeah. Well, we all want a number, right? We think about 10,000 steps a day or 8 hours of sleep at night or 2 liters of water you're supposed to drink, right? It's very helpful to have these kinds of guidelines. And it's important to recognize that those numbers might be higher or lower than what's actually right for you, right? The typical guidance that we get, they're guidelines. And so what I see with social health is that the amount and type that's right for you might differ than me or differ than someone else, right? We each have different preferences around how much connection we enjoy and what kinds of interaction feel fulfilling. So for example, I'm more introverted, which means that I need less social interaction on a day-to-day basis, but I really love quality time with friends and family and balancing that with some solitude and alone time. I know you're looking at me surprised because you know me and I'm very outgoing, but that's different in that it's about my energy and how I recharge, right? I need some alone time to balance the quality time that I spend with friends, whereas someone who's very extroverted can be around people all the time and feel very energized by that. So that's an example. In the book, I outlined 4 different social health styles, I call them. So these are typical kind of personas or habits that we fall into based on the amount and type of connection that we like. I did also come up with kind of a guideline based on some of the research on the habits that people who are particularly socially healthy maintain, and also sort of the minimum threshold that we need to feel connected. And so I call this the 5-3-1 guideline. And the idea is to aim to connect with 5 different people each week, to maintain at least 3 close relationships, and then to spend 1 hour each day connecting. So 5-3-1, 5 people each week, 3 close relationships, and 1 hour a day connecting. And that's, again, those numbers might be higher or lower than what's exactly right for you personally, but that's a good starting point to explore and be intentional about what's right for you.
Is there a test to determine what is the right number for you?
That's a great question. Yeah. No, it really comes down to subjectivity, right? We can't hook you up to an fMRI or, have you do a blood test to examine what social health looks like for you. It's really about your sense of, do you have people who you can rely on, who you feel supported by? Are you interacting as much as you would like, or do you feel alone too often, right? Being intentional about reflecting on our social lives and our social experiences and paying attention to that. After you leave a dinner party or a lunch with a friend, how does that leave you feeling, right? Do you love hosting? Do you love going out? Just really examining and inviting us all to reflect on our social experiences and what feels right for us.
Okay. In our ever-evolving digital society, how do you see technology affecting our social health? And what can we do about that?
Yeah.
Both positively and negatively.
Yeah, it is both positive and negative too. And what we see in the data is that technology and social media in particular can have both positive and negative effects, really depending on how we use it. So for example, if we're using social media to substitute in-person connection, right, and to really rely on it to fulfill our emotional needs, that is linked to more loneliness, anxiety, and so on. But if we're using technology truly as a tool to stay connected, to identify new communities that we can be part of and things like that, then it can be beneficial and truly is a lifeline, of course. So it's about thinking how we use it. One of the more interesting things that I researched for the book was about AI and the use of AI companions in people's social health. So for example, today there are hundreds of millions of people around the world who are using artificially intelligent chatbots as a source of companionship. AI friends, AI romantic partners who they're conversing with on a regular basis. And so it opens up interesting questions about the role of technology for perhaps replacing our in-person relationships or complementing and supplementing them, and also thinking about how we design those going forward. What is the role that we want technology to take as these innovations emerge?
Oh, very interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch and see what the results of that will be. How important, Kasley, is community in maintaining social health, and what can communities do to support well-being, social well-being for its members?
I love this question because a lot of times when we think about connection, we think about our one-on-one individual relationships, right? A coworker or a friend or a family member and what those mean to us. And those are really important sources of social health. But it's also really important that we feel a sense of belonging and feel a sense of community with groups that we belong to. Even if you don't know everyone in that community, feeling like you're part of something bigger can be an important source of social health. So when we think about a community as a neighborhood or a community as a workplace, or other kinds of communities that we might belong to, a church, for example, these are really vital sources of helping people feel seen, heard, and like they matter and are important. And I would love to see more initiatives here in Massachusetts and across the US and around the world to really double down on the importance of strengthening local communities. Right now, I think a lot of people feel disconnected, and that's what the data shows us, right in their own homes, in the places where they live. And that's a huge missed opportunity and something that needs to change if we're going to really reweave the social fabric in our culture.
It's certainly something that we as a coalition is looking into. So that's very important to us. So continue to let us know what the research is showing, and especially when you see innovative, creative ways in which the community can be involved. I think we'd like to share that.
And I think the coalition is a great example of leading the charge on that and helping encourage people to connect, to take on leadership roles in their communities, to bring people together. And the more that we can spread that message and inspire people, even in small ways, right? So for example, there are studies showing that smiling and waving to your neighbors can help people improve their mood and even feel less lonely, right? It can be as simple gestures as that, or helping someone out out, doing simple acts of kindness, right? It doesn't have to be as big as throwing a block party. It can be as simple as introducing yourself to someone who just moved in.
Okay. And what role do you see in terms of public policy in helping to promote social health? Are there any policies that you feel currently in place that you think has been effective?
Yeah, this is a really interesting area. So last year, the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, issued an advisory about social isolation and loneliness as a public health issue and making recommendations for how we can create a more socially healthy country. And I think that a lot of what he outlines in that document is really powerful. It's empowering for us as individuals, but also thinking about the role of cities and other key stakeholders. I think there are examples of policy and legislation that has been put forth specifically around isolation and loneliness, but I'm also interested in the ways that existing legislation influences our social health. So for example, parental leave, right? And policies around how much parental leave we have here in the US. In other countries, it's the norm to have a year or two or more during which a family can bond with each other and take care of their physical, mental, and social health, both the babies, the moms, the dads, and so on. Whereas in the US, we have less parental leave, right? And so that introduces different complications that could have downstream effects for our social health. So I think what's actually really important is not just dedicated legislation for this issue, but also bringing this lens to all the legislation that we're thinking about and advocating for social health to be a consideration in everything that we do.
Yeah, we try to describe it as connections in all things, right?
Absolutely.
So in your research and personal experience, have you encountered any moving stories that illustrates for you the power of connections in social health?
So many. Honestly, my favorite part of writing the book was all the people who I got to interview and the stories that I got to tell. And I tried to include many different examples, people from all different walks of life, all different ages, different countries, and so on. One of the stories in particular that stands out to me because it really highlights the imperative of social health is a woman named Taylor, who is a friend of mine, and she is someone who has gone through quite a few trials and tribulations in the last 5 years. Her father was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer, which is a very serious form of cancer and not given long to live. Shortly thereafter, she went through some life changes, positive and negative. She moved to a new place, got married, bought a house, and she and her husband got pregnant, only to find out a few months in that she unfortunately lost the baby. And so while she was going through that journey of contending with her own physical health, her own mental health, right, the grief of losing her pregnancy, the grief of knowing that her father could pass away at any time, literally just the healing that she needed to go through, right? What we saw in her example was that her physical and mental health were really struggling during that time, but she was able to fall back on her social health as a source of resilience, as a source of getting through those challenges. So if you think about your overall health as a Greek temple with different pillars that support it up, there's a physical pillar, a mental pillar, a social pillar, perhaps a spiritual pillar or an environmental pillar, right? These are all the things that hold up and bolster our health and well-being. So at a time when her physical and mental health were really struggling and suffering, she was able to rely on the strength of that social health pillar. She had friends and family who were reaching out to support her and care for her and show up for her in those times of need. And so I think that's a beautiful example of recognizing that, first of all, social health is distinct yet interconnected with our physical and mental health, and that it's an asset and a resource that we need to invest in and build up and strengthen before we really need to rely on it in circumstances like that.
Oh, that's such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Finally, Kasley, what is the one piece of advice you would like to give our audience to start improving their social health today?
Just one? Well, I would say a very simple thing. You know, something I emphasize a lot in the book is this idea that you don't have to completely overhaul your life to be more socially healthy, right? It doesn't require you moving to a new place or dramatically changing your day to day. The research shows that very simple gestures can be powerful, right? A 10-minute phone call a few times a week has been shown to measurably reduce people's levels of loneliness. Something as simple as a text message to a friend saying, "I'm thinking of you." People systematically underestimate how much that means to the other person. So these are very simple gestures that we can do. And so I invite people to think about, what are the opportunities in your day to infuse a little bit more meaningful connection? It could be pausing when you buy your coffee from the barista to ask them how their day's going. It could be, instead of scrolling on your phone through headlines or social media when you're standing in line waiting for something, sending a message to a friend instead. When you're commuting, instead of putting on a podcast, call a family member or someone you haven't talked to in a while. So thinking about these relatively simple and even brief ways that we can start to prioritize social health in our day-to-day more.
Wonderful. Kasley, thank you so much, not only for being with us today, but for helping us to create the social health movement in the Commonwealth. Your work is truly inspiring. We look forward to seeing the positive changes that you will bring to your readers everywhere.
Thank you.
And to you, our audience, we hope the information shared today will be helpful to you as you work to strengthen your own social connections. Remember, fostering strong, healthy relationships is key to living a longer, healthier, and a happier life. We invite you to join us in celebrating National Good Neighbor Day, a special day dedicated to building stronger, more connected communities across the Commonwealth. On September 28th, we invite you to host a neighborhood event celebrating all we bring to our communities, renewing our social contracts, and really what we know to be a good neighbor. You can learn more about Good Neighbor Day of Actions in Massachusetts by visiting our website, endlonelinessma.com. As always, we invite you to join us again next month for another episode of Connect. Until then, let's reach out and stay connected to those we love, our friends and our neighbors, especially those living alone. Visit us at endlonelinessma to watch past episodes of Connect, to learn more about the coalition and find ways you can join the movement, helping to alleviate loneliness and promote healthy aging in Massachusetts.
September 28th is Good Neighbor Day of Action here in Massachusetts. We invite you to celebrate with your neighbors. Use the excuse to get to know each other. This is so important as a source of resilience, connection, and good feelings. You could invite people over to your house for a barbecue, partner with the local library or fire station to send out an invitation and invite people to gather together. Whatever it might be, I invite you to use this opportunity to connect. Check out endlonelinessma.com for ideas and inspiration.